Okay, Peter. Start.
Okay. Look at all the smiling faces. Come on, the rest of you guys smile. You'll be back outside soon. Okay. Okay. Good morning. Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, August 13th, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'm going to read the abbreviated script. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all devices and phones. For items with public comment, after committee members have finished their discussion on an agenda item, the chair will afford members of the public up to 3 minutes to speak. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their name and any affiliations. To give public comment, you must be recognized by the chair and speak through the chair. There's to be no crosstalk with others in attendance. In the interest of the efficient use of our time, please speak through the chair. To be recognized for making a public comment, use the raise hand feature by clicking on the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then click on the raise hand button. When you finish your comment, please click the lower hand button. It's important for me to note that CRAC isn't required by law to take public comment. We do so because we need your invaluable input. We view public comment as a privilege, so please remain respectful in your comments and do not disparage other speakers or the members of this committee. Okay. We will take public comment. Leah, do I have to do roll call for people that are here?
Yes.
I do. Okay. So I guess we should have that down somewhere. All right. So for the committee, Tim Brain.
Here.
Jen Carberg.
Here.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Sarah Boyce.
Here.
Rachel Freeman.
Here.
Joanna Roach.
Here.
Okay,
Sorry.
great. And then anticipated speakers, Alan Bartels.
Here.
Kim Starbuck.
Here.
Leslie Snell.
Here.
Great. And staff, Leah. Hill.
Here. Peter, also Paul Murphy.
Here.
Okay, Paul Murphy, sorry. Okay, so public comment. We'll take public comment on issues and items not on today's agenda. If anybody has anything to say, do the raised hand feature. Okay, seeing none. Approval of the minutes? No minutes? Okay. And we'll go right to number 5, introduction and discussion on planning board and town regulations with coastal resilience in mind, by Leslie Snell, Town of Nantucket Director of Planning, and Paul Murphy, Town of Nantucket Building Commissioner. Okay, it's all you guys.
All right. Well, thank you all for inviting us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Leslie Snell. I'm the Director of Planning, and I've been with the town since 2002. So I've been around for quite some time. And I'm going to touch on the zoning aspects and the planning aspects that may play into, your resiliency efforts. And Paul Murphy, the building commissioner, is here to speak to any building code related questions that you may have, or he can speak to some zoning things as well that he would enforce as the building commissioner. So I looked through your packet and I saw the key considerations for new or revised local bylaws and regulations. So I did read that. And I'll just give you all a little history of our zoning and planning on Nantucket, just for context. The zoning bylaw was originally adopted in 1972. From what I understand, it was very much a compromise because the voters were reluctant to adopt zoning. And so a fairly lenient bylaw was adopted in 1972. So from 1972 until around 2005, not a lot changed with the zoning. I mean, obviously there were changes over time, but in terms of allowed density and that sort of thing, those changes didn't start coming until the early 2000s. There was a comprehensive community plan that was done by the Planning Commission and others in the 1990s. And that was in place until we adopted an official master plan in 2009. For master planning, under state law, the requirement is that the planning board put together a master plan for the long-term physical development of the municipality, and that had not been done until 2009. And that plan was adopted by the planning board. It was accepted by the planning commission, I believe the select board, and it was adopted by a vote of town meeting that year. It was Article 26, and that was adopted by a unanimous vote. So from 2005 until now, we've made a lot of zoning changes that actually reduce density. That's not the narrative that you often hear, but that is the reality. We have replaced a zoning district known as RC2, which was 5,000 square foot lot with 50% ground cover that allowed almost any use that's allowed in Nantucket. That, as of around 2005, was about 1,500 acres. We're down to around 100. I don't have those numbers handy right now, but that's kind of where we are. And that's been replaced with, residential zoning that allows less ground cover. It's been replaced with commercial districts that have a larger minimum lot size with a reduced ground cover. Other things that we've done, we've taken a look at vulnerable areas, specifically out in Matticat. It's a good example on Red Barn Road area, Smith's Point, and we've replaced some higher density districts with lower density districts in an effort to, again, not encourage too much development where it shouldn't take place. So those are some things that have been done. I think you all are, well, I'm sure you're familiar with the Harbor Overlay District. That was adopted around 2007 by town meeting that prioritizes water dependent uses and access to the harbor when properties are developed or redeveloped in that zoning district, which is in the downtown. We have a few sections of the zoning bylaw that specifically address not specifically coastal resiliency, but we have the Harbor Overlay District, which I just touched on. There's the Flood Hazard Overlay District. There's a provision in the height bylaw that allows for additional height so that people can meet the base flood elevation that's required. And then under our site plan review, there's requirements for drainage for larger projects, but single family dwellings and duplexes and that sort of thing is exempt. And the other thing that I wanted to point out right now, the planning board recently contracted with the Barrett Planning Group to update the 2009 master plan. And I think what's really important for your group in particular is that, prior to 2009, coastal resiliency wasn't a big topic. And even under state law, that's not something that we're required to include. But that is something that is obviously very important to Nantucket. It's a topic that's very important and needs a lot of consideration. And so our consultant will be, including coastal resiliency in the updated plan. And where we are with that right now, they're still gathering data. They're going to be reaching out to groups very soon. Your group will be one of them, to get their input on, whatever's pertinent to that group. And then we'll start, public hearings and that sort of thing to get public input on the plan. So I expect, coastal resiliency to have a big part in that, and it did not back in 2009. And I don't know if Paul has anything he wants to add on the building code side of that, but I think we're really just here to, hear from you and to answer any questions and to, engage in any sort of dialogue about what you all are thinking about and how that may work into or not work into the zoning bylaw. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to add, the planning board also recently contacted with a consultant to redo their subdivision rules and regulations. So that has, you know, a lot of regulations pertaining to how new roadways are constructed, drainage systems, and that sort of thing. So I think that may be something that you're interested in as well.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
I just wanted to mention a few things. So my role in coastal resiliency really comes through the building code, and the building code mitigates flood losses by obviously elevating structures. So, you know, in new construction, it's very clear the foundation system has to be engineered. You can't have any living space below the base flood elevation. And it's, you know, in our zoning code, as Leslie said, we do have a provision that allows homeowners to construct their houses at the height requirements of the zoning district plus the base flood elevation. So that's kind of what you're seeing down there on Easton Street. And then for existing buildings, we've got a 50% rule, which based on the assessed value of the structure or a real estate appraised value of the structure, if you hit 50% in cases of the house not being historic, you're required to lift it. We've got a lot of historic homes on the waterfront that are exempt from the 50% rule. So the historic structures are protected from being required to be lifted when they undergo major renovations. And as far as increasing standards for resiliency, I can't, the town has to follow the state building code presently, or they would have to petition the state for, you know, additional requirements that they would like to undertake for coastal resiliency. So they can't make things stricter than the state building code without petitioning the state. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have a lot more to add unless somebody has a specific question for me.
I'm going to get to Joanna in a minute, but I thought that the thing was that when it came to state laws that applied, of course, down here, I thought we couldn't make things weaker, but we could make them stronger.
Yeah, so that's not correct. So if it's a regulation that involves a building code matter, yeah, the town cannot make things stricter than the state building code without first petitioning the state to do that. And I don't think it's ever been done. The Board of Building Regulations and Standards is really funny about, you know, allowing modifications to the state building code because it applies statewide. And the whole reason for the building code was to, you know, to streamline the code across the Commonwealth and not have one code in Sandwich, Massachusetts, and another one on Nantucket. And so, yeah, you can't be more restrictive than the state building code.
And just to touch on that, and Paul, you can tell me if I'm not stating this correctly, but in addition to not being more strict, you can't have local regulations that address the same topics that's addressed by the building code. Like, for example, this isn't coastal resiliency related, but it's a good example. Swimming pools. A building code requirement was introduced that said you can either fence them in or you can have an auto cover. So people on Nantucket started choosing the auto cover to not fence in their yards. The neighbors started complaining and saying, well, I feel it's unsafe because my pet or my child or someone's going to wander into their swimming pool. So we tried to introduce a local bylaw requiring fencing, and we couldn't do that because it was addressing an issue that's already covered by the building code.
Okay, got two more people who have things to say, but I know that the state has just recently opened a coastal resilience office in Boston, so I imagine we might seek advice for them on how to proceed. But for the reason why we're pursuing this is we're trying to integrate coastal resiliency into local regulations and policies to the best of our ability. We're an advisory committee, so we're not going to be telling you guys what you can and can't do. We're just going to advise the select board based on what we learned from you and from reading the regulations. So it's our charge. And we'll certainly take all the help you guys can give us. Okay. Joanna, are you there?
Yes,
You want to go?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Thanks. That was great. I just have a couple of questions. One of which is, have you guys conducted like an internal review within your department of things that folks who might work in your areas are concerned about? Because it seems to me that when you read this, you know, one of the things that I thought about was like, what are the top 5 concerns that you guys are going to have as things roll out? Like we're experiencing change, all of us, in real time, right? And we're trying to create rules and structure around something that we don't know and can't anticipate what the impact is going to be. And so I'm wondering, just based on your experience over all these years on Nantucket, where do you think the pain points are going to be and what are they?
I really can't think of anybody. I think of any, but I do know that there's an aversion to wanting to, from a homeowner's perspective, especially with existing construction, there's an aversion to wanting to comply with lifting your house. Like no one wants to do that. So people, I noticed that as the building official, I noticed that people don't want to lift their house. They don't want to be subject to the 50% rule. They try and get around it. And so I see more of that than I see someone willingly want to lift their house out of the floodplain. We do see it, but people, you know, generally don't want to do it. They like to be able to renovate their house and not worry about having the additional expense of a lift. So that's what I see in the field. Other pain points, you know, it's hard to say. Yeah, I don't have any that I can think of, but if I think of any, I'll join the discussion again on it.
So I'm just going to ask a follow-up question. So you guys really then haven't seen like a wave of people coming in and saying, what are our options and how do we begin to think about this? Like, so that's been like, what, maybe like quantify that if you could.
Yeah, I know no one. I can't think of a time where someone has come in to my office and been concerned about coastal resiliency. I just haven't seen it because there's additional expenses involved with it, and I haven't seen anyone concerned about sea level rise in terms of permitting their structures.
Thank you.
Okay, before I get to Gary, I just want to respond to what both of you guys said. Paul isn't seeing people coming and being concerned. Joanna is concerned, as we all are. And so you guys know, of course, you know, we created our coastal resilience plan, and one of our main focuses right now is public outreach. We have a lot of work to do in that area. We're hoping that the public outreach will precipitate people coming in to our regulatory boards and saying, I got to do something, or I got to be ready. I mean, right now, the key areas that we're concerned about, like, you know, Mattocket, you know, the Brant Point area built on salt marsh, all of that, Washington Street area, those areas eventually will be a lot more flooded than they are now, but it's too far out for people to conceive of that. And we can wave the flag and say, hey, this is happening, it's coming, but it's not happening right now. So people aren't worried about it. It's probably why they're not coming to you. Some people are being proactive in raising their structures, but there's not enough urgency out there for people, I can understand, to come and see you guys.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah, we don't see a lot of that.
So we are, as I've said a few times in public settings, we're the longest range planners on the island. We're longer range planning than the planning board, than the planning commission. We're looking decades ahead to what's coming based on the science that we have at our disposal. So it's quite a chore to tell people, hey, this is going to happen. They're like, yeah, right. So just so you guys know that, we're trying to lay the groundworks for people to eventually start to come to you guys. That's why we're doing this.
And I want to point out one, on page 100, where you have recommendations. Part of a bill that just passed by the governor is to allow accessory dwelling units by right. And that's a zoning exemption that we have no control over anymore. So the recommendation of limiting new residential uses to single-family detached dwellings with no permitted secondary, tertiary, or accessory dwelling units. To some extent, that's something that we wouldn't be able to implement following the legislation that just passed at the state. So just to point that out. And I
Okay.
think it's brand new.
Okay, Leslie, thank you. Gary, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, please, Peter, thank you. So Leslie, here's the question I have. Having looked at the plan prior to this meeting, I'm thinking about the material which Leah had in the packet for this meeting on page 97, where Arcadis recommended some minimum changes in the zoning law. And as Leah and Peter asked us to think about this, or what changes we might recommend, I reread it and I said, look, Arcadis, much smarter than I am, certainly, they've already done this. So I'm looking at the minimum changes recommended. And the question I have is, have you looked at the minimum changes they recommended? For instance, one of the things they say is that Nantucket should adopt provisions included in the Massachusetts 2020 model floodplain bylaw in order for us to continue participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. This model bylaw includes mandatory updates to the current flood hazard overlay district. Now, I assume we all want to be able to participate, in the National Flood Insurance Program. So something like that ought to be really easy, that you folks ought to be comfortable with, and we ought to figure out how someone could put that before the town meeting, because it's one of the minimum recommendations, and that seems to me to be a no-brainer. I don't know about the next one, but certainly that's something like that is pretty easy. Have you taken a look at these minimum requirements? Of course, in Nantucket, you ask for a little more, and usually you get a little less, and that's how you get stuff through the HDC and the planning board and everybody else. But here's the minimum the request, and it looks, as I say, it looks like a no-brainer to me. What do you think?
Well,
All right,
I
thanks,
did
Gary.
look at that. And, oh, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
Oh, sorry about that. I did review the slide. I didn't have time to do research on what exactly that would entail, but I put a question mark by it and wrote, we'd probably need an environmental planner to help enforce additional, floodplain and other environmental regulations that are in this document. So, I'm not going to say it's something that I'm opposed to or support. I would just need a lot more information on how that would be implemented, and I'm happy to, talk with someone about it or have a meeting about it with someone who's much more familiar with those requirements than I am. So.
All right, thanks, Leslie. Jen, go ahead.
Thanks, Pete. I have a couple questions I was thinking as we were going, and it's interesting that you said we can't be more restrictive here than the state, because it's opposite for our Conservation Commission, Pete, and I think that's what you're thinking about. We can have a more restrictive local bylaw as long as we're not countermanding anything that's at the state level. I'm wondering, the two questions I have are there conversations at the state level about adapting state planning and building regulations that kind of are taking coastal resilience into account? It seems that those might be starting to happen just from all the chatter that we've heard. So I'm curious if that's starting to happen and how we can see that coming down to Nantucket. And then my other question, kind of, Leslie, I know there's the flood hazard overlay district that is in zoning that helps, kind of contribute to thinking about flooding. That doesn't take into account sea level rise, groundwater rise, erosion, all those things. Is something like establishing a coastal resilience overlay that's zoning related, is that useful? Is that a good kind of tool for figuring out how to put in some of these things that we think might be better in places like Brant Point. So we're not getting swimming pools, or we're not getting, underground parking garages and larger, coverage, like, thinking about what are the best tools we have for starting to hit those things that we, I'm not in planning, I'm not in building, or zoning, but peripherally know seem to be, problematic in these coastal areas. Those are my 2 questions.
Thanks, Jen.
Probably find the best great answers in most New York City.
You respond?
I've no shot at sniffing them, you know what I mean?
Looks like Peter
I
might.
think your
be
chair is frozen.
Yeah.
Hold
Do I
on,
respond?
Oh, there he is.
hold on. Was that you trying to speak, Paul? Because we could barely hear you.
Well, I mean, I can speak a little bit to the first question. I haven't seen anything through my organization, the Building Officials Association, that is interested in adopting any additional, any increases for the floodplain regulations, any increase in standards, I guess. I haven't heard anybody at the state level suggest that yet. But, that could be going on in a parallel forum, but no one's approached us about that as an organization.
Okay, Leslie, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, creating some sort of coastal resiliency district with, additional regulations is certainly something we can talk about. It's something that we haven't really talked about. It's something that I think may come out, at some level in the master plan discussion, which is just starting. So, maybe we should sort of, try to tie the 2 together to the extent that they can be. I think there's a lot of, discussion and research and seeing what other municipalities are doing in coastal areas in Massachusetts, not other states, to toss around some ideas. And I don't think anyone's opposed to talking about it. I just think it's, still relatively, a new topic in, the planning world and even locally.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Leah?
Thanks, Peter. I've got a couple questions about building height restrictions. Hoping that you can explain that a little bit more. I know that there's like different districts with different heights, I think. And then I had a specific question about, someone had asked me this, I wanted to ask you all today. What is the current height regulation in the FEMA areas with Arthur Reed's article, and which areas does this occur in?
Yeah.
Well, Arthur Reed's article addressed people that have properties in the floodplain. I don't have, I think it applies to any, Leslie can correct me if I'm wrong. I think if you're in the floodplain, the town of Nantucket allows you to set the structure at the base flood elevation plus the height requirements of whatever zoning district you're in. So you don't end up with, so in other words, the school of thought is the higher, if that regulation wasn't in effect, the higher you go, the higher elevation you are, the less house you're gonna have. So they didn't want to, I guess, restrict or hurt a homeowner who wanted to build a new home and hold them to 30 feet when maybe if the base flood elevation is 10, subtracting 10 from 30 gives you a 20-foot high house. So that was the spirit of that regulation, to allow somebody the ability to build to the height requirements of the zoning district and comply with floodplain regulations.
And that's allowed by special permit. It's not a by right allowance. So it does have, a butter notification and review by the board. It also asked, are there different zoning districts with different heights? And there are, in the village residential district, which is primarily Mattocket, they have a 25-foot height limitation. The commercial downtown doesn't have a specific height limitation. It's by special permit. The commercial neighborhood district just got an amendment at town meeting, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a little over, oh, sorry, that was CMI. It's a little over 30 feet, but most of the island has a 30-foot height limitation, with the exception of in those FEMA districts.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Do we have any other comments from board members, committee members? Any questions? Again, okay, Matt.
Yeah, it seems to me that the recommendations, like sort of the easy ones and the medium ones that we have in our packet are the ones that should, you know, at least the easy ones should be focused on first, or the easy and the medium. And that is, they need to be at a couple different levels. It needs to be Concom, it needs to be planning, needs to be here. I guess my question is, how do we ensure that these are, you know, how do we ensure these are included or discussed at the master plan? What is going to be the process for the public and for us and for the other entities? Because my concern is if they're not included now, will be another 5 or 10 years before they get put in again. Not all of it is not all of it's a building rule, not all of it's a zoning rule. Some of it, it's all different aspects. Those recommendations, they all look pretty easy, but then you have to figure out who does them. But how do we, like, I guess for us, how do we ensure that they're included in this time, and how do we build the public momentum? Everyone, our first inclination here is always to say no to everything, but I think part of what we're trying to do is educate people and make them realize that it's a real mistake to build, you know, a pool in a floodplain where the pool's going to be underwater, and, you know, all those, you know, like someone trying to do it in Mattakit when the property itself might not be there in the next 2 to 10 years. Kind of, it's protecting as much as anything. And so how do we build that momentum and build that through our regulations, through the public meetings of the master plan process, et cetera? How do we do that? Yeah, that's a guess for Leslie.
I think, you know, one good step would be, and the FinCom and the planning board and the select board and the planning commission have been doing this occasionally over the past couple of years, is having a joint meeting, for instance, with the planning board, because they bring forward the zoning articles primarily. The select board can, but it's usually coming through the planning board, and the planning board holds the public hearings and makes the recommendations at town meeting. The planning board's more familiar with, you know, how it may actually play out. And the staff, of course, is more familiar with, you know, the resources that would be needed to make sure that it's effective and that we can apply it and enforce it and make sure that the requirements are met. So I think, you know, maybe having a narrow scope meeting with the planning board at some point to talk about, you know, some things that you may want to somewhat immediately implement would go a long way. That way you all can, you know, talk to each other and hear, you know, what you can agree on or what, you know, may need to be hashed out a little bit. So I would encourage that to be scheduled at some point.
Okay, Leslie, thanks. And Matt, what I'm thinking of is similar to what we did with the Harbor Plan Update Committee. We get our ideas together, then we have a joint meeting. They hear us, we tell them what we want so that it doesn't get left behind. So it goes into the update. And then they, like the Urban Harbors has done for today, given us the section that's going to go in so that we get to see it and make sure that it goes in there. So I guess that's a lot of work for us, a lot of homework. Do you have a timeline, Leslie, for when that process is going to get going?
For town meeting or for the master plan or both?
For the master plan?
I don't have it handy, but I just was working on a spreadsheet yesterday with a lot of people's contact information for the consultant to schedule meetings with. So I know she's going to kick off meetings soon, and Leah has already reached out to me to make sure that she and people from your group are included, and I know you're on the list. So I guess I would just say be on the lookout for an email from the Barrett.
Okay. And so I guess for our committee, it'd be a good idea if we had the current plan knowing that that plan's going to be updated, but for our own edification to look at it and see where we might envision putting our ideas into it as you guys went along and updated it. So that's directed toward Leah and you. Okay, do we have any other comments from people?
I do, Peter.
Okay, I see. Okay, Gary and then Leah had something. And Deanne, I see your hand up and we'll get to you at the end of this discussion.
Yeah. I mean,
Thank you, Peter.
we're talking,
Go ahead.
you were just talking about the master plan, and I don't know why we would have to wait for the master plan. We have a coastal resiliency plan. In it, it includes certain minimum recommendations for
Right.
zoning changes.
Right.
What we need to do, following what Matt was talking about, we need to get that moving. How do we do that? Well, we have to put it on the planning board agenda. Do we have to ask the select board to do that? I'm not sure we're allowed to do that directly, but we don't have to do any more homework. It's been done by Arcadis. They know about this stuff. And here they have put it into writing what these minimum recommendations are. We just asked Leslie and she said they haven't done the work on it yet and it may need environmental review. Let's put it before the planning board and find out what needs to be done in order to be able to go forward with these minimum recommendations. That's something we should be pushing for.
Yes, and I agree with you, Gary. We need to do that. And that's what we're talking about. But in this instance, the master plan is the long range plan for Nantucket in the planning arena. And so like the harbor plan, we want to make sure that what we want goes into the master plan looking ahead. What you're talking about is planning board regulations, the minimum changes, the recommendations. Yes, I'm not discounting that. But what we're talking about for the master plan is to make sure that it has what we say should be done going into the future. You know what I'm saying?
I hear that, but you know, when you're talking to someone over 80 years old, I'm thinking about the next 5 or 10 years. I'm not thinking about 2070. And here we have recommendations. And I just think we should take care of the next 5 years and 10 years. And how you do that, don't wait for the master plan. Let's get it before the planning board now, figure out what they need to do in order to be able to make that recommendation for the town meeting.
All right, I agree with you. All right, thank you. Leah?
Oh, I was just gonna say that I can send you all the master plan, but like Leslie said, coastal resiliency wasn't part of the original one, so, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other comments from the committee? Okay, seeing none, then I will take public comment. Deanne, you had something?
I did, Peter. Thank you. And thank you for this conversation. I think another way to approach this is to think about the risk to the town and the taxpayers of the amount of investment that's being made in new construction and remodeling in the floodplain. All you have to do is attend a Concom meeting and see what's being built on Easton Street. And the town, as I understand it, has a responsibility to provide access and infrastructure. And this is what's happening on Baxter Road. And the taxpayers are such great risk of incurring these costs that I just hope that CRAC will really focus in on this. And really be the leader. Another possibility, and I know it's being discussed in areas that are experiencing coastal erosion and flood, is the discontinuance of roads. How long does the town have a responsibility to provide access and infrastructure for coastal roads that are eroding? I know Matt has thought a lot about this, and hopefully we can have some initiatives coming forward that will protect us all, such as hold harmless agreements that could be part of a building permit or part of a Concom permit. This doesn't take a lot of time, and for many of us, from our perspective, it's long overdue. Thank you.
Okay, so Deanne, I had a question about the first thing you brought up, infrastructure. What you're saying is people may be raising their homes in various places, but that is not necessarily in time and in tune with what the town is providing. So you raise your house down at Brand Point and the water comes up. Are you saying that we need to encourage the town to be raising roads so that they can? I'm just looking for clarification of what you said.
Peter, I don't know the answer. I just know the issue. And as I understand it, the town has a responsibility, a legal responsibility to provide access and infrastructure on town and county-owned roads. So, you know, what we could do is we could anticipate the issue and we could have hold harmless agreements. That's what Matt and his colleagues are trying to negotiate with the property owners on Baxter Road to just try and reduce or eliminate the risk to the town in these situations. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Right. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? No? Okay. Again, this is a long-term process for us. So this is a sort of a first, first look at it, and we'll be going forward and reading the regulations and trying to see how we can, as I said, integrate coastal resilience into those. So thanks, Leslie, and thanks, Paul Murphy.
All right, well, thank you for inviting us. And, if you get the email from our consultant, please respond because we want to hear from you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Email a copy.
All right, so discussion and edits on the coastal resilience section of the Nantucket and Natticut Harbors Action Plan update with Urban Harbors Institute staff, Alan Bartels, Kim Starbuck, and Kristen Uderwick. Okay, you guys.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for having us. And so I'll talk first and then hand it over to Alan. And I believe everyone is pretty up to date with what we've been doing with the harbor plan, but we have gotten to the point where we've developed some draft goals, objectives, and recommendations regarding the coastal resiliency section of the plan and wanted to run those by you. And okay, Alan's bringing up the presentation. Great. Okay. So I'll go through the first few slides and then we can, I can pass it over to Alan. He'll talk a little bit more about the goals, objectives, and recommendations. One thing to note is that we do have a public meeting, which is coming up on August 19th from 4 to 6. And that's at the police station or the community room at the police station. And so more than welcome to join there. You can provide us with feedback here. You can come to that meeting, or you can provide us with comments through email as well. So you can go ahead, Alan. Just quick purpose of this plan update. It's to update the 2009 plan. It is to identify goals, visions, and recommendations for the waterways and address things like boating, fishing, climate change, public access, natural resources, and generally should inform state decision-making regarding activities in the town. We're looking to obviously align this with existing plans like the Coastal Resiliency Plan, and there is overall a 10-year updating schedule. So every 10 years, these plans are updated. Okay. Here is our current timeline. And so where the red circle is where we're at right now. But basically over the last year or so, we've been doing a lot of public meetings. We did a public survey. We've been soliciting, feedback from lots of different people on their thoughts, including this committee. And then right now we're at the public meeting number 3, which is coming up next week. So everybody's welcome to attend that. And then we'll be coming out with a draft plan to be released this fall of 2024. And that will be open for public review. Then we'll have another public meeting, and then it will go towards municipal approval and then state approval. Next slide. Just a reminder is these are the boundaries for the plan. So got a boundary going around Nantucket Harbor and a boundary off of Mattocket, and those little blue dots are areas where you guys have identified some different coastal resiliency projects. And then just some comments that we've received from you all is, which are things that we were keeping in mind with the goals and objectives, is that the coastal resiliency plan is a living document, and you can update it as risks change, that the harbor plan should align with the coastal resiliency plan, and then also, do things like help with project prioritization. Generally, we should improve coastal resiliency coordination between the groups and public education. We can incentivize those considering relocation, potentially incentivize those considering relocation and their individual responsibility for possibly relocating. We should be using the best available science in this, and also using this to develop and secure coastal resiliency projects. So I think Alan is it's the next slide, the goals. Okay, next slide. Just, I can just quickly go over the big issues that people talked about were water inundation due to coastal storms, sea level rise, climate change, just the general vulnerability of the island to isolation during extreme weather events, the need for cohesion between all of these plans, existing funding limitations, since there are a lot of projects that have big price tags on them. Just generally, private coastal resilience efforts lead to inconsistent levels of shoreline protection, and how there are different public perspectives on how to approach coastal resiliency projects. So either generally public voting, or should opinions be coming through the experts, and mixed public support between nature-based and structural coastal resiliency protections, and then the need to basically the need to communicate complex coastal hazards, risks, and their resiliency opportunities. So these were the big issues that really came out during our public outreach. And Alan, do you want to go through the goals and objectives briefly?
Sure. So our first goal for this coastal resiliency section of the harbor plan was to minimize and prepare for the impacts of climate change within the harbor planning area. And there are a bunch of objectives down below, but they'll be on each of the following slides. So I guess we'll start with objective 1, which was to ensure cohesion of coastal resiliency and adaptation efforts between plans by the town and local partners. So our recommendations for this section were to convene regular intercommunity department meetings, coordinating objectives, coordinating project prioritizations, and sharing strategies for different challenges. For recommendation 2, to implement the coastal resilience plan and adapt the plan to the changing conditions, as I think like acknowledging it as a living document. Recommendation 3, addressing the known data and planning gaps. 4, work with environmental justice communities to address their resilience needs related to coastal resilience, as well as the different communication formats for non-English speakers. Number 5, that a harbor plan implementation committee member should be, the harbor plan implementation committee, which is going to be following after this plan, should include a member of CRAC. For objective 2, to increase collaboration and educational outreach with on-island groups involved in coastal resiliency and adaptation. Our first recommendation was to work with local partners to develop coastal resiliency strategies, prioritizing nature-based solutions wherever possible. For 2, incorporating public community-based science into the town's monitoring initiatives, engaging the public and volunteer organizations. For 3, conducting public outreach or education outreach on coastal resiliency and adaptation practices. And 4, to hire a dedicated coastal resiliency education coordinator and a dedicated coastal resiliency and adaptation grant writer, helping with those different funding strategies. Objective 3, building coastal resilience within Nantucket and Mattocket harbors by improving infrastructure. which reduces the risk of coastal hazards, such as flooding and erosion, prioritizing these nature-based approaches and green infrastructure where possible. Our first recommendation was to improve the coastal resiliency of docks and piers. And so these are some of the below are some of the listed projects from the coastal resiliency plan that are related to I guess docks and piers. Our recommendation 2 was to improve the coastal resiliency of road infrastructure within the harbor planning area. And you'll see also below streets and areas identified in the coastal resiliency plan that are that are within this harbor planning area. For objective 4, improving and diversifying the town's ability to fund coastal resilience and adaptation projects. Number 1 was, I guess, to join the Community Rating System National Flood Insurance Program. I guess noting the previous conversation before this one, seems like something that that CRAC is interested to pursue as well. Number 2, pursue opportunities to secure funding for resilience and adaptation projects. Number 3, work with homeowners to increase coastal resiliency awareness and response. And for objective 5, integrating climate resilience and adaptation measures into municipal regulations and bylaws. And their first recommendation was to update the bylaws and regulations to address current anticipated climate concerns with emphasis on nature-based approaches. Number 2, to identify types of regulatory relief to facilitate adaptation and resilience projects. And number 3, develop and implement educational activities to encourage awareness and compliance with bylaws and regulations. And so I guess that's a quick run through of all our objectives and recommendations. The full text was available in the, these are all kind of abbreviated recommendations. The full text was in the packet sent around to you and is also available from either me or Kim. So that kind of brings us to our discussion. Being, I guess, what issues, goals, objectives, or recommendations would CRAC want to enhance, add to, or edit? What climate impacts or resilience strategies does CRAC want to highlight? Is there any more data information that would strengthen this coastal resiliency section of the harbor plan update? So I guess we'll open up to questions.
Okay, does anybody have anything?
Yeah, and generally, as Alan noted, you know, these are just shortened versions of the recommendations in the document that I believe was distributed to you guys. There's more details about how we might move forward with some of these things. Eventually, also we'll put in responsible parties so that, you know, people who have agreed to are willing to move forward with helping that out and advancing those recommendations.
Okay, Jen, did I see your hand up? Jen Carver, did you put your hand up? No?
I did not.
Okay, all right. This is your chance now to add to what we've been presented and what you read in the packet. That doesn't mean it's your only chance, but now to be a good time. I thought it was really thorough. You guys really heard us. And of course I'm on the committee, so I have my 2 cents to add in. As far as I can see, you didn't leave anything out, but I could be wrong. So I'm looking for comments from the rest of the committee. And Alan, the Nantucket Blue Pages was completed in 2015. I just noticed in there you had it listed as 2024, but it was a while ago since it came out.
I can update that. Thank you.
Okay, it's a minor thing, but whatever. Well, if there's no comments from us, oh, Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. I have a couple recommendations for the background section. I would suggest adding in descriptions of the coastal resilience methods, and I'll send you my track changes after this meeting. But just to give a little bit more background about the 3 different methods. And then as far as a recommendation under the funding one, which I can't remember which number it was, one of the recommendations, which is also a recommendation in the select board strategic plan, is to incorporate coastal resiliency recommendations within the capital capital request or capital program. So I think that should be aligned in that as well. And yeah, I think crack, a lot of the responsible parties, you are named under them. So if you haven't read this, you should read it and see if some of those things are attainable by the committee as well. But I'll send you all of my edits and suggestions via email.
Thank you.
And that doesn't, and so you can, if no one has any comments now, I see Christy, and I'm going to get to you. If you don't have your comments now, you can still send them in. The plan isn't done yet. Anyway, go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, I don't know if this is an Urban Harbors issue or a town of Nantucket issue or our issue, but I'm very interested to see how the development of the conversation between public and private goes. And I'd love to, if they have any guidance on how better to engage the private sector with strategies, if they've had any experience with that, or if we're kind of on our own with that. But it's sort of, it's got that feeling that there's going to be public that just does not want to take part. I think cost is a big issue with a lot of people. So if they have any, suggestions on how, if they've seen that in the past, but I just think that's going to be very an interesting component as we push on how that's going to develop itself.
All right, thanks, Christy. Before Alan or Kim responds, one way is regulations. There will just be coastal resilience regulations, I think. The recommendations that are in the plan, the 40 recommendations, we are striving to make those become reality. So that's how private and public, we're going to do those things. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I think that we have how do I start from the beginning? I think the way to do it is to include the public and include them in a process that explains it and asks their input at the same time. We did this back in the 90s with the comprehensive plan. It was a consensus document where everyone sort of agreed. They didn't mean they loved it, but they agreed before we moved on. I'm seeing it now with the Washington Street Work Group. A lot of the neighbors who were very opposed and were upset after 2 or 3 different public meetings in the work group meetings, or with we've had a couple different breakout morning and afternoon meetings. They are coming around and making recommendations. Some of their concerns all of their concerns are addressed. Some of the things they're worried about, I think a lot of their concerns are going to be addressed. And I think there's more buy-in. What has to change isn't like, in order to change the regulations, I think what has to change is our sort of process on how we work with everybody. I think whether it's us or the planning board or the select board, I think it's having public meetings, it's asking for input, it's listening to the input. It's not just saying, here's a plan, follow it. It's, hey, we're working on a plan, what do you think? And you give them maps and they draw out what their concerns are, etc. This happened with Rob McNeil and the downtown sidewalks, and he brought all the stakeholders in, and we ended up with an even better plan. People were giving away, some of their sidewalk to make it better for the public. They were, giving easements and letting the sidewalk go onto their property so people could pass. I think that's a little simpler than what we're talking about here because it's pretty complex. But I think that is we have, if we want to follow it, we have the strategy, we have the process.
I agree with you completely, Matt. And thank you. And it plays right into what we're trying to do with public outreach to get this to become household information so that we have a community effort working to make it all happen. Anybody else have comments, questions, edits? Like I said, it's not the last time. You can email to Leah and she can get the information to the Urban Harbors Institute and to the Harbor Plan Update Committee. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Are there any public comments on this? Okay. Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Kim. Thanks for making the effort. Thanks for your awesome work and getting this in for us.
Thank you, everyone, for your help.
Thank you.
Is there, Kim, is there an absolute deadline where you got to have it by if people come up with edits or additions?
Not right now. Once the draft plan is out, then it will be out for a 60-day review. So at the end of that 60-day review, that would be the end to the public comment period. So right now, you know, we haven't released the draft plan yet, but it should be released this fall, and then it will be 60 days from there.
Okay. All right. Okay, Gary.
A quick question. When it says municipal approval, what are we talking? Are we talking about going to the town meeting, or are we talking about select board? What does that mean?
Yeah, so this would go to the select board.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But then for it to exist, the state has to approve it as well, Gary.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we all set, you guys? Okay, it looks like we are. Okay, we're going to move on to discussion and highlights from the Downtown Resilience Planning Community Open House held on August 7th at the Whaling Museum. And that's Leah.
Thanks, Peter. I saw a lot of you there, so thank you for coming. So the morning session was from 8 to 9:30, and we had 49 community members attend that. And that's not including staff. We had about 20 staff. And then at night from 5:30 to 7, we had 61 community members attend plus 20 staff. So it was a great turnout. I heard a lot of good feedback about the format. So people like just being able to drop in, you know, at their leisure. There was no like official start time where you had to be there right at, you know, 8 a.m. And if you weren't there, there were a bunch of poster boards set up. So one side of the room was for the Easy Street Flood Mitigation Project. The other side of the room was for the Francis Street Beach Improvement Project. And the poster boards were staffed and explained to the community that came through. There was food, there were drinks, handouts. And so we got a lot of community feedback on the board specifically. You know, some of them were interactive. What did people want to see there? What did they not want to see there? Able to answer questions. So yeah, it was great. I would love to hear feedback from you all that attended. What did you like about it? What did you think could be improved for the next one? We did have 2 Spanish interpreters there as well, and all of the materials were translated into Spanish. The interpreters weren't needed. There was no one from the Spanish-speaking community that came. But I think that as we continue to do these open houses, having those interpreters there is really important. And so that, you know, non-English speaking community members can feel comfortable and come to these formats and know that there's someone there that can translate for them and that their input is extremely important. So I'll open it up to the committee just to discuss what you thought about it.
Okay, Rachel.
Thank you, Peter. I just wanted to compliment everyone who was involved in the planning of this event. I thought it went incredibly well. I thought it was very well received. I think it targeted all the right people. I had incredibly interesting conversations that ranged like the entire spectrum of conversations I think I could have had. You know, from positive to people with concerns. Met a butter who I hadn't met before. it was an incredibly well thought out format. I think it was fantastic. Like kudos to Leah and everyone who was involved in planning it and carrying it out. It was an impressive event. So thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks, Pete. I echo that. I was in the mornings. I went to the morning session, and I think it's probably the most interaction I've seen in one of those kind of public settings, which I liked. You know, partly it was a lot of us hadn't seen each other in forever, so it was great to interact and talk about the projects in person. But I liked how it was done. One of the things I was thinking about is that I spent so much time talking to people. I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but I also never sat down at the table and filled out the feedback form. So I wonder if, you know, because you have a record of everyone kind of that signed in and emails, if sending the, and you probably already thought about this, but sending those out to the people that attended to solicit that feedback would be great.
Go ahead. Thanks, Jen. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, I just want to, yeah, Jen, it's on my list to do this week is to send out a thank you email to all the participants and then send them the link to give feedback specifically for the Easy Street project. We have a pretty quick survey for people to fill out online.
Okay, Leah, thanks. And I'll, of course, steal that word, echoing what everybody said. And I was there for the morning session and was impressed with the diversity of people that were there. I felt like it should have been longer because I felt like at least the morning session, the museum was like right at 9:30, packing up, getting us out of there. Of course, they got to have the museum open for their patrons, but I felt like it should have been longer, maybe just by half an hour. But and then I think my impression was that whenever we're leading up to and when we're ever doing our feasibility study for whatever project we're working on, what the town is working on, we should do one of these beforehand to make sure that people know what we're working on, and so we can get that feedback. Every single one of the recommendations, I think, should have I guess a pre-party like this, where people can come in and comment and see what it is, and all the staff involved are there. I just thought it was excellent. Go ahead, Gary.
The only comment I have, the reason I think it was successful, and I think it was, I was there in the morning as well, is that there was an incredible amount of pre-publicity about this. It was covered in the newspaper. It was covered on these email, on the news. And when I think about all of the issues we're dealing with, and we're desperately trying to educate the public, we just don't have the opportunity to do the same kind of advertising in advance as we were able to do on this particular product. And that's why it worked so well. There was a lot of pre-demo advertising, so people really knew about it. And when I talk to people about the stuff we're doing, a lot of people say, gee, I don't really know what's going on with the coastal resiliency efforts. And that's because we don't always have the opportunity to have so much pre-publicity before we have the subjects we'd like to get their public input on. But that's why it was so successful. A lot of great pre-publicity before the event.
Thanks, Gary. I agree. I totally agree. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I agree with Gary. It was well publicized. I went to the morning session, and I was kind of surprised to see how many people were attending and interested. It was really cool. And I thought it was really well done. I will pass along a comment. I sent a friend and his wife who are interested in this kind of stuff down, and their comment was, this is complicated stuff, and it's hard to grasp it by reading the posters. The print is small. It's sort of a complicated subject to absorb in that presentation. And they were saying a live presentation of it would probably be really helpful. And I'm sure that's coming, but I just wanted to pass along that sort of it was terrific, but it's also has some limitations just in the format of it. But really well done. I was really impressed with how many town people were there to explain stuff. That was particularly smart, I thought. So anyway, really, really well done.
All right, thank you, Tim. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, Tim, thank you for that feedback. I heard the same thing too, that, you know, the text was kind of small on some of those posters and hard to understand. But on the Easy Street website, I'm going to be putting the presentation that Trevor Johnson from Arcadis gave to you all, that goes through all the alternatives so people can watch that. And then I'll be uploading the PDF version of the poster boards as well, so people can zoom in and read, you know, what's on the poster board if they were having a hard time at the actual event. As far as all the publicity, luckily we had some money from the offshore wind grant to be able to spend a couple $1,000s on all of the ads. So I think that helps significantly to get people there and get the word out. But that stuff is not cheap to advertise.
All right, thanks, Leah. Anyone else? Any impressions? Any comments? Are there any members of the public that want to comment on this event? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public outreach ideas, strategies from committee members. We have today Acclimate's social media report for CRAC by Ava Rollins. It's all you, Ava.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. I know some of you, ones that I don't know, a pleasure to present. So Acclimate engaged me to enhance their social media as a channel for communicating with the public. And so we're presenting this report about how we've been using it for community engagement and education. We've had a really positive experience collaborating with Leah for NRD and the town of Nantucket to enhance messages that are coming from those organizations as well as our overlapping partners. So we put together a little report about the growth that we've had and the engagement. And our most engaging, and then we had a little bit of, as Leah pointed out, boosts to certain pieces that we put out there, and we've shared that data in this small report. And so we mostly wanted to share what we've been doing, so you could see visually and gather any feedback as to whether, you know, this has been helpful, and if you'd like us to continue to collaborate, because we really enjoy using these tools to communicate with the public. Part of that was also an ad campaign that we undertook in collaboration on behalf of the Clean Water Coalition. And you can see those visuals in the report, I think, that Leah embedded. Can everyone see that?
I can, Ava, do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, maybe you can share your screen so that everyone could see, because it's not long. Yeah. So yeah, the front is just an introduction of what we have, and then the growth, and you can kind of see what we've been doing in collaboration. So we work with, we've highlighted local organizations that don't necessarily have an affiliation, that glamorize local food, and using our own resources, which I firmly believe is the key to our sustainability as an island, growing, producing, and creating our own resources. So everyone loves Pip and Anchor. We've done a couple with them. I also went behind the scenes at the dump and did kind of a visual tour of that to talk about how people could better sort their trash and tackle the PFAS issue as relates to trash. And then we're also using that fodder for a new publication that's coming out in Martha's Vineyard. And then the works in progress was our collaboration with NRD in the town. And we have a couple more of those NT for the fall, as well as with the Chamber of Commerce. And then we can scroll down. So our work overlaps with what's outlined on page 250 of the 21 Coastal Resilience Plan, but there has been obviously updates since then. So this is an opportunity to provide any feedback. And then some examples of the Clean Water Coalition advertising. So these are images that were donated by photographers that I work with. And then my graphic designer laid the text. So we can scroll down and kind of see how powerful visuals can be, especially when created and shot from within our own community. And then those headers were from our coalition members' brainstorms with Emily and Shellfish Association and Mariah Mitchell Association at Land and Water Council. So I won't take up too much of the your time, but just wanted to share what we had going on and open ourselves to feedback.
And so, Eva, it's good that you followed the previous item, and
yeah.
You know,
as the only public relations agency on the island, I thought it was funny. But I do know that Leah put a lot of effort into your previous article too, what you guys were doing. So those don't just happen. We work pretty hard on them.
So you've probably seen that, you know, every Thursday we have a post that talks about coastal resilience and the coastal resilience plan. And, you know, a couple weeks back, I had someone suggest to me in a yoga class that we need to, she said, you guys just got to hire a summer intern or an intern or somebody or some kid to post a reel every single day. And I agree. I, you know, something to what Gary said, you know, we're, you know, the coastal was the thing at the Whaling Museum on August 7th, everybody knew about it. It was all over the place. People were talking about it, and then more than 100 people showed up for both sessions. So we're in public outreach mode now, in addition to other things. People need to know what we're doing. They need to know that every single month we have at least 2 meetings, and these are our agendas. These are the things we're working on, but it needs to be something that, like, you turn on Instagram and there is a reel right there. It pops up every day. And so that so that we're talked about, we're known. You know, you maybe have heard me just earlier saying that we're the longest range planners in the town. So it's easy for people to just take in the information that we're throwing at them and saying, the sky is falling, but it's not going to fall for 20 years or whatever. We got to make them understand the importance of doing the work now and get everybody on board now.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Peter. Thank goodness you guys are the longest term planners for the town, because a lot of people, you know, don't see this, but I think a lot of people do. I think we're in this unique situation in this coastal microcosm where we're really feeling climate change. And I think that, you know, even people that were protractors a few years ago are really starting to see what's going on. So I absolutely agree with the fact that this is a super powerful tool. I don't agree that that all of our needs can be managed by an intern in terms of, you know, photo video. So as you'll see, like, these photos were taken by young professional photographers who have either very well priced or donated images. So I do believe we have very talented, we have great talent on the island. I don't believe we need to pay commercial prices for it, but I do believe in setting aside funding for visual narrative. And I always believe in paying these younger creatives and artists for their time and resources with that. And I think that it would be incredible to have reels like that. That being said, I don't think you always need professional content anymore. And one of the trends that we've seen in communications is that people used to spend $10,000 on a video. You can make beautiful content on your phone. you know? And so there are ways to use our community to gather information. And it could be really cool to explore a greater strategy of using the residents of the town to gather content about coastal adaptation and what's going on along the coast. And that could be really impactful, because if you can take it back to empowering the public that this is an us issue, not a you guys' issue in terms of planning, that's kind of going to be, I think, the key to change and having people become more active participants, because clearly they want to engage or they wouldn't have all come to the event that Leah planned.
Right, exactly. Okay,
And
thank you.
Go ahead. I'm always happy to sit down with you guys and brainstorm. You know, I'm here. Leah knows where I am.
I'm glad you're with us, definitely.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm just writing something. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Ava. I really liked what you just said too about kind of empowering the community, because I think a lot of times, you know, when we give a talk or like a longer term talk, we often are thinking about how we're empowering people or that call to action. And I think I would love to see a marriage of like things that I've seen Ava do, and then the community engagement work that we at CRAC have done. You know, posting every Thursday has been great. And I think that original list we had of like, what are the topics for each week or each month or something like that. And then I think those posts are great, but sometimes like, right, they're overlong, and I know my own habits looking at social media. I don't want to read a million things. And we're scrolly, right? We're like doing. So there's different, and it doesn't mean that our message has to always be that, has to always be short and just visual. But I think this is one of the tools in the communications toolbox. And one thing that Ava did last year, not specific to CRAC, but was like the interviews. Ava, I don't remember if you had like a tagline for it, but you had like the short snips of different people talking about their work, right? So like you had me at Linda Loring, you had Leah, you've had different
Works
people.
in progress.
Thank you. Works in progress. So it doesn't mean like, it's like your scientific, you know, collection is done and you have the report and everything. It's like, here's like me in the field or something like that. And I love that example for combining, you know, maybe something that's going on at CRAC, something that either whatever stage it's in the planning stage, it's in the thinking about stage, it's in the draft, we're almost done stage, or it's in the like shovel ready stage, or it's in the like we're in the middle, there's diggers and things are moving stage. I think those reels and videos can be really, really helpful. So I would love to see that combination of that list of like what topics do you want to cover, and then to Ava's point about the like video on a cell phone, I think that there's a real opportunity for that. People really respond to people that they recognize in the community and see and know talking about something that they are passionate about or involved in. And so I would be super supportive of doing something like that can help explain or just almost off the cuff, like talk about a project that as it relates to coastal resiliency. Especially, you know, I wasn't able to go to the open house. But I think hearing from what Tim was saying and how there's a lot of information out there, and it was, so maybe if it's the first time someone saw it, it was hard to digest. And so it's wonderful if there's then like taking that same content and then like having a conversation about it or something. Anyway, that was a really long rambling thing to say. It would be great to have the short videos that highlight a lot of that work.
That's great, Sarah. Thanks. I agree with all of that. And I keep thinking that way. Go ahead, Leah.
Thanks, Peter. Ava, I just had a question. With the work with Acclimate, how can you guys help us? How can we help you? You know, if you can give us some strategies or recommendations. Like Peter had said, CRAC is kind of on like the community outreach and engagement part of one of the recommendations. So any input is helpful.
Yeah, no, we went through our funding and program for Q1 and Q2, and then we've actually None of you have been harassed for the last 2 months because we're waiting to see if we want to continue for the fall. And that's one of the reasons that I joined today, to just get everyone's feedback to see if this is something that's helpful, if it's useful. I think, like, you know, in full transparency, there was some identity confusion about the organization before I came in working on the social media. So I've had a lot of fun doing it. Obviously, I get to work with you guys on the works in progress. And to Sarah's point, we so often celebrate, this is funded, this is finished, you know, this is all, you know, great. But the fact is, adapting to coastal resilience is never going to be a completely finished project. So we have to celebrate these benchmarks of success. We have to celebrate all the worker bees doing all the things, because that's what's going to make it. So I think there's room for both. I think that I'll go back and we'll discuss that people really enjoy the off the cuff works in progress. I have obviously some unpublished videos of you, Leah, that I would love to get up that we've shot, and happy to do some more. And I think it would be really interesting to have a conversation about, you know, we all watch The Current, right? We know that this more sticky content that is a little bit more entertainment value focused is what people are clicking on to watch. And the fact is that, you know, a house falling in the ocean, or a massive, like, remember when we measured the beach over the winter, Leah, and it had gone, what, like 51 feet back? Like, that is super interesting content. And having one of you guys talk about that, I think can become really engaging. And perhaps we want to talk about a incentivized public engagement campaign where we inspire citizens that are not one of us to go out and they're like, oh, I'm out on the beach and this happened last night. You know, how could we maybe incentivize them to create that content, to share it with us, to make those collaborative posts? And so everyone starts to take more of a sense of ownership over the changes and erosion, instead of just us professionals, us small ants trying to move everything, doing it for everyone. And I think that would be a conversation I would love to sit down and donate my time to talk about with anyone that wants to have it. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah. I can't formulate what I'm thinking, what I want to say, but we definitely need more of Ava in our lives to get our message out. Are we all in agreement in that? Do we like what we're hearing from her? You can nod or put your thumb up or whatever. And maybe we need to have you back once we've come up with some sort of plan. What do you guys think of that? You guys are all looking outdoors because it's beautiful and you want the meeting to be over. Yep, I can see it in your eyes. But since no one's going to say anything, I'm saying it for the committee. We definitely need your help, Ava, and want to come up with some ideas, some more refined ideas that you can help us with. So,
and I have sorry, I can't find the raise hand button. It moved from wherever it used to be. So,
okay.
On my Zoom, can I through
speak?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I obviously am fully in support, but I do have a question of, like, logistically, is the partnership with Acclimate a monetary partnership? Is it a volunteer of time? I think before we as a committee say, like, yeah, let's on board, I just want to know, be upfront about logistically what that means for us. What are we saying yes or committing to?
Yeah, I think we need to have a conversation, because my time working on this has been funded by Acclimate, and currently we're deciding on funding for, like, the rest of the year. So if this is something that's helpful for you, I would love to go back to the organization and talk with them and ask if they can underwrite my time to continue and use that to work with you guys. We seem to think that should be no problem. So I guess, why don't we continue a conversation through Leah maybe, or Peter, over email, or however this works. I'm open to any way of it working, but that is our mission. Our number one mission as an organization is to support the work of CRAC. So if this is positive and we'd like to continue it, I will put in my hat to continue to work on it. And I really appreciate the positive feedback. That's why I do it. We just, I don't want this organization to be something that where people are like, well, what does Acclimate do? I want it to be like, we're communicating directly with CRAC, and we're getting feedback from you guys and presenting regularly what's going on. And so I'm so glad that we're doing this today. One of the members suggested that we present, and I'm really pleasantly pleased at the reception. So yeah, I think we'll go back and we'll take it from there. And Leah can instruct us on the best way to communicate if we can be subsidized moving forward by Acclimate. Does that work?
Yeah, like the Whalers football team has a boosters club.
Yes.
That supports them. That's what you guys are.
Yeah, and we funneled towards the Clean Water Coalition when they were getting going, and then we were funneling a little towards NRD, and it would be wonderful to have a more direct communication channel with CRAC. So that would be very much worth our time, and would love to help with that. So yeah, I'm confident we can figure it out if it's something that appeals to you guys. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Great.
Leah.
Thanks, Peter. Just a couple things. Yeah, CRAC doesn't have funding at all. So if it can go through Acclimate, that would be very helpful. And I know that CRAC we've been talking about trying to get, topics and coverage of these meetings into the newspapers and, the current and all of that. And just, we haven't had any luck. And so I think it would be helpful if Acclimate was willing to help us to either give like a quick update about what's going to be on the agenda for the next meeting, or a quick summary of what CRAC did at today's meeting, and be able to share that online too. That could be another way to.
I love that
to
idea.
get it out. And then, interviewing the members of the committee, that would be another idea as well.
And we didn't get the grant for it, but we had an idea where we would create some sort of short video that would both be on the town's website. In a perfect world, it'd be among the previews at the Dreamland for movies all year long that would run, so that people could see, where the faces of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. We've created a plan. Here it is. Anywhere that we, it might show on the Dreamland, on the High Line or the Steamship Authority, anything to get it out there to people. But we didn't get the funding for that. We envisioned Yellow Productions or maybe the town doing it for us or whatever, but it doesn't have to be terribly long, but it has to, and you don't want it too long because you don't want to bore people, but you want to get the salient points of what we're working on and the importance of it out there.
I think that would be wonderful, and I would love to look into doing that for you. While I have you all, is there anyone who would not want to be interviewed for that video project that's on the committee?
I'm the chairman and you guys all have to do it. No, you don't want to do it, don't do it. But it's going to be at least me and Leah. So we'll make it fun. No one's saying no, so.
Great.
All right, this is great discussion, you guys. Thank you very much for everybody's participation. There's that word again. And thanks a lot, Eva, for showing up and being there for us. It's awesome.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone.
All right. New Business Committee and Natural Resources Department reports from Planning Board, Concom, Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, Select Board, Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers, and other committee members. Do we have any new business? Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, sorry, this isn't new business. This is just a quick report on Concom. Is this the time?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, just so you know, finally, Concom is kind of gotten into it, into working on a order of conditions for the Bluff project. And it'll take several more meetings, but it's kind of gotten down to the nitty gritty now, which is good. All the presentations and everything have been completed, and we're working on like an order of conditions that everybody would be happy with. Not to say that it's definitely going to pass or anything, but the work is going on. So we're making some progress, and that's it.
Up and stretch. All right. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the report. Go ahead, Leah.
I just wanted to let everyone know that on Saturday morning, I attended the Civic League's President's Breakfast, and I gave an update about coastal resiliency, the Easy Street Project, Francis Street Beach Project, and then I was explaining coastal resilience districts to them as well. So there were, I think, 16 of the 25 presidents there. And I know a lot of them are going to be working on their area association plans. So I recommended that they don't forget about coastal resiliency and they add that into their area plans.
Was the food good?
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was at the Nantucket Inn, and it
Awesome.
is completely renovated and it looks beautiful in there. They have a really pretty big ballroom area too.
Excellent. Thanks for going. Okay. No other reports, discussion of upcoming meeting dates and topics? Because we're not going to.
Peter, sorry, I see Jen has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Jen.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Leah. Not I guess a report, but an announcement of 2 upcoming activities that are kind of related to coastal resilience. It hasn't been advertised yet, but September 12th at 5 p.m. in the Public Safety Building, NCF and the trustees, our consultants for the refuge resilience work, will be doing a public meeting to present where they are so far with working on the Coskata Coatue refuge and thinking about resiliency alternatives to use out there to protect the refuge from washing over. So that was September 12th at 5 p.m. And then on Wednesday, September 4th, because I don't think we're having a crack meeting before this, Sarah and I are doing the climate change summit again this year. It's September 4th at 4 p.m. at Great Harbor Yacht Club. And this summit is, kind of an update to talk about what the actual impacts and adaptations to climate change are on Nantucket. And so we'll do a little bit of an update of the state of climate change, but also we're having a panel of people that work in different industries on the island, how they're seeing change due to climate change within their industries and how they're adapting. So that's the kind of the format that we're working on, and there should be hopefully some announcements at the end of this week, early next week on what those are actually going to be, who's going to be there and what they're going to be talking about. But just to have that on your calendar now.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you, Peter. As long as we're doing calendar items, I wanted to mention that Charles Johnson is doing a stormwater feasibility study open house tomorrow at, I believe it was a bit of a moving target, but I believe it's a sewer facility, and I will have to look up the time and maybe send it to Leah, or maybe Leah knows off the top of her head. But I think it would be a great opportunity for everyone to find out what's going on with the stormwater manager and to figure out what they're looking at in terms of ways to both manage stormwater in the downtown area and to disconnect direct inputs into the harbor. Basically, he's working with Horsley Witten on this, on a feasibility study, and that's what will be discussed tomorrow. So if you can, you should go. Thank you.
Can I ask a direct follow-up to Rachel through Pete?
Go ahead.
Rachel, what time was that? I haven't seen anything about it, so I just wanted to see what time, day or night?
It is during the day. Leah, do you know? I just want to make sure that I have the right time because it's been kind of a moving target.
Peter, can I answer that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the last I heard was on Friday from Charles, and he said it's between 10 and 2. And I think it's just like drop in whenever. There's no, from my understanding, there's no like formal presentations, more of like discussions. So that's open to the public at the sewer treatment facility, I believe in their trailer area.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Peter,
that's it.
may I follow
Right.
up?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I would add, Sarah, that I believe Horsley Witten is planning to be there because they're overseeing this feasibility study. So I think they will be there to answer any questions. It's just good information. I feel like hasn't really gotten out there. So if you have a chance to drop by, I think it'll be well worth it.
Thanks.
Okay, awesome. So just for everybody's own and going into the future, new business committee and natural resource department reports, that is the place where you announce things that you all just announced. So don't feel like you're taking up too much time. If you have calendar announcements, anything from your committees or your organizations, this is where we want to hear, any little thing that's related to CRAC. So thanks a lot, you guys. Okay, if there's nothing else from you, discussion of upcoming meeting dates and topics. Because we can't get a quorum for August 27th, we won't be holding a meeting. So no meeting on August 27th. When is the next meeting after that, Leah?
Let me check my calendar. One moment. The next meeting is September 10th.
That's a ways off. Okay. Okay. Hopefully we get a quorum for that one. But everybody have fun, whatever you're doing. End of summer vacations and stuff. Maybe Sarah's going to go to Maine. Okay. Nothing else to talk about. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Sarah, seconded by Tim. Roll call vote, and I'm just going with what's on the screen. Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. All right, you guys, thank you very much. Great meeting. Enjoy the day.
You too.